The night everything cracked open, I was on my knees in a billionaire's kitchen, whispering a prayer to a dead boy, while his father screamed at me for daring to say his name. And a second later, his picture slipped out of that man's hand, like someone invisible had slapped it away, and the glass shattered on the tile between us. For a guy who didn't believe in anything he couldn't buy, that sound scared him in a way money couldn't fix. And for the first time in 7 years, I saw Victor Romano look less like a king and more like a man who just realized his castle was built on bones. My name is Elisa Harper, and this is the story of how I went from being just the help in that house to the woman standing next to him when he finally dragged the truth about his son's death into the light. It was about 2 in the morning, the kind of quiet where even expensive houses feel haunted, when Victor came storming into the kitchen, robe flaring, voice already sharp. "What the hell are you doing down here? Are you casting some spell or something?" I was kneeling on the cold tile between 2 candles with a small wooden frame propped up in front of me. Michael's smiling face looking out like he always did, gentle, a little shy. It was his birthday, and I couldn't stand the thought that in this big marble mausoleum of a house nobody was saying his name out loud. "Mr. Romano." I was just, "You don't get to kneel here like family," he snapped, coming closer, towering over me, breath hot with whiskey and sleepless nights. "You don't get to touch anything that belongs to my son, do you hear me?" I should have been used to that tone by then, the one rich people use when they want to remind you where you stand, but it still sliced through me. When I moved to steady the photo so it wouldn't topple my elbow, brushed the candle, and the frame wobbled, and before I could catch it, Victor grabbed my wrist, yanked me back like I had tried to steal something, shoved me sideways into the old kindling box by the back door. Wood and splinters scattered, pain shot up my arm. I felt the cut before I saw the blood, a thin red line in that flickering light. "That photo is sacred," he hissed, finger shaking. "You don't even have the right to breathe near it." My voice was shaking, but I said it anyway. "He gave it to me, sir." "Michael did." For 1 second his eyes flickered like the name landed somewhere he couldn't control, then his jaw locked up again. "Liar," he barked, "and don't you ever say his name in my kitchen." He reached for the frame, and that was the moment the air changed. There was no wind that night, no storm, just a thin crack in the back door for the candles to breathe. But suddenly, a cold gust hit us like the house exhaled. The flames went wild. The frame slid out of his fingers, as if pushed and crashed onto the tile glass, exploding into sharp pieces across Michael's printed smile. Everything went still, not peaceful, still watched, still like someone else was in that room and was not impressed with either of us. "I'm sorry, Michael," slipped out of my mouth before I could stop it, and Victor flinched, not at the glass, not at my cut, but at hearing his son's name hanging over broken glass again. He couldn't look at me, couldn't look at the photo. He just straightened his robe and muttered, "Clean this up before morning. Get rid of all of it, candles, picture everything," and walked out as if he hadn't just thrown a bleeding woman across the floor. Now you might be wondering why a woman with 2 working legs and a shred of pride would stay in a house like that. Believe me, I've asked myself the same question in quieter hours. The short answer is that kid in the photo, the long one, starts 8 years earlier, when his mother Catherine hired me. Back then, the Romano estate was still loud in a warm way, staff laughing in the kitchen, Catherine humming as she walked through the halls, Michael trailing after her with a book about galaxies tucked under his arm. I was 23, broke and working 3 jobs when she asked if I wanted something more stable. I thought she meant less soul-crushing than mopping a grocery store at midnight, but what she really gave me was a front-row seat to how money can build the prettiest walls around the loneliest people. Catherine saw something in me long before I saw anything in myself. One afternoon in the small chapel room, she insisted on, when they bought the property, She sat down beside me on the bench, hands folded, and said, "Elisa, I want you to be Michael's godmother." I laughed, actually laughed, sitting there in my thrift store shoes, with cleaning spray still on my hands. "You know I scrub your baseboards, right?" I said. She smiled, eyes tired but clear. "I know what you do, and I know who you are. And my son needs someone who will listen to him when we can't, someone who sees him, not just the last name on his report card." She asked me to keep it quiet, said Victor, saw people in categories, that godmother was a title he only gave to people with certain last names and certain bank accounts. So on paper I stayed housekeeper, but in practice I became the person Michael, snuck down to the kitchen to talk to at midnight when the nightmares came. He was a quiet kid, not that fake quiet adults praise when it's convenient, but the kind where your brain is loud all the time and your mouth just can't keep up. He loved space stars, weird little facts. He'd say things like, "I think stars are just God's freckles," then look away like he'd said too much. He would ask me, "Do you think you can love someone and still not see them?" And I'd feel that question settle right in the places my own parents had missed. Victor, meanwhile, loved results. He loved numbers, deals, control. He thought grief was something you outworked, and faith was something weak people used as a crutch. When Michael died officially in a tragic accident near the University Observatory, Victor didn't just stop believing in God. He stopped believing in anything he couldn't schedule or buy. Catherine passed not long after the house went silent, and Michael's room turned into a locked museum piece. We didn't say his name in front of Victor if we wanted to keep our jobs. I said it in the chapel instead, in the garden, in the quiet creaks of the house. 7 years of that kind of silence will rot a place. The morning after the kitchen incident, my elbow bandaged up with dish towels and tape, I thought I was done. Martin, the butler, stepped into the pantry and closed the door gently. "He knows you cleaned up the glass," he said, "and he knows you're hurt." I tensed, waiting for the words. "Pack your things," but Martin surprised me. He said, "You can take the day off." For a man who used to bark if I hummed along to the radio while dusting, that was almost an apology. Later that day, he found me on the old bench in the back garden, the one where Michael used to sit and name clouds. Victor stood there in his loosened robe, not quite knowing what to do with his hands. "You should have gone home," he said. "I did what needed to be done," I answered. We sat in that thin air for a minute. Then all of a sudden he said, "I don't believe in God, not anymore. Not since Michael. If there was someone up there, he wouldn't have let it happen." There was no lecture in me, just the simple truth. Faith doesn't stop life from being cruel. It just gives you somewhere to set it down so it doesn't crush you. He scoffed, but he didn't leave. When I told him again that Michael had given me that photo, that he trusted me with it, he went quiet in a way I hadn't seen before, like some rusty lock finally felt someone turning the key. A few days later, a letter arrived in Catherine's handwriting, long after she was gone, addressed to Victor. Inside, she confessed she had made me Michael's godmother, that she knew he wouldn't have approved back then, that she trusted me because I saw their son the way she did. There was a smaller envelope, too, with my name on it tucked into his. It was from Michael, written before he died. "Thank you for being my safe place," he wrote. "I know Dad loves me, he just doesn't see me. I'm keeping your picture in my room one day. I'll tell him, I promise." Victor read both letters, and then he came to my tiny room in the staff wing, like a man walking into a church he never thought he'd visit. He held the repaired photo out to me, new glass over old scars. "He smiled like this because of you," he said, voice rough. I was wrong about a lot. That was the first time I believed maybe his grief wasn't just anger. It was terror that if he admitted he wasn't the only one who loved his son, He wasn't the only one who had failed him either. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? Billionaire finally says sorry to the maid, gives her back the photo, everyone cries a little and moves on. But grief has layers, and so does guilt. The real twist came in a plain envelope with no return address and a single line on the front for Victor. Inside was a letter from a witness saying there were things about Michael's death that didn't add up, asking why Victor never questioned the autopsy, why the driver was never interviewed, why the university handled everything so fast. The part that chilled him said, "Some truths don't stay buried forever." Victor brought it to me and Martin in the library. My stomach dropped, because I remembered something Michael had said once near the end. Sometimes the shadows follow me even when the lights are on. I had chalked it up to anxiety, but now it sounded like something else. Victor hired a private investigator named Caleb, a quiet man who looked like he'd seen more than he said. Caleb reviewed the police report, the university notes, the coroner's summary, and all he could say at first was, "This is too clean. Real accidents leave messy paper trails." He found a name in Catherine's hidden files, a visiting professor named Langford. That name hit me like a cold wave, because Michael had mentioned him once, called him the man who talks in riddles and looks at you like he already owns your secrets. Caleb tracked down an old email from a student describing a so-called mind expansion seminar, off-campus phones collected at the door. Strange exercises and Michael's name on the informal invite list. Then he went to Philadelphia to meet another former student, a woman named Jordan. She told him about Langford's late-night meetings, about the way he zeroed in on certain students, about the night she walked back to campus with Michael, when he said, "If anything happens, don't believe the report hugged her too tight," and walked away. She handed Caleb a small notebook Michael had left in her studio cubby the day he died, with a charcoal sketch inside of a boy standing on a cliff, a dark shadow behind him, like smoke with fingers. The boy's face turned not in fear, but in defiance, and under it, his handwriting. "He won't get all of me." When Caleb laid that drawing on the table in front of Victor and me alongside Catherine's ledger full of ignored complaints, and her own note about seeing Langford and Michael arguing near the observatory, something in that rich, closed-off man finally shifted from "I lost my son" to "someone helped push him." Victor could have buried it again, protected the Romano name, written a few big checks, and called it a day. He didn't. He called a press conference. Didn't tell his PR team to spin it, didn't hide behind lawyers, just put a simple framed picture of Michael on a small table and asked me to stand beside him. "You speak first," he said. He trusted you more than he ever trusted me. Standing there with cameras pointed at my second-hand dress, I thought about every time I'd been told to use the service entrance to blend in to keep my voice down. I took a breath and said, "My name is Elisa Harper. I was hired to clean the floors in this house, fold the laundry, stay out of the way, but love doesn't stay in the margins. It sits with a boy at the kitchen table when his father is too busy, and it sees when something is wrong, even when nobody wants to hear it." I talked about Michael's quiet, about how people mistook it for weakness, about how predators like Langford look for kids like that because they're easier to gaslight. I said, silence does not protect the vulnerable, it protects the powerful, and we are done being quiet for their comfort. Then Victor stepped up and did something I never thought I'd see. He opened Catherine's ledger, held it up, and said, "This house, this name, this money, all of it has been used to build walls today. I'm using every dollar, every lawyer, every connection to tear down the wall that helped kill my son." He announced the civil suit against the university, the cooperation with criminal investigators overseas, the scholarship fund for quiet kids who want to be teachers. And he did it with his jaw shaking, not from anger this time, but from the weight of finally telling the truth. It didn't fix everything. The university tried to buy off former students with non-disclosure agreements, threatening scholarships and careers. Victor wrote checks to cover legal fees so they could say no. Some still signed out of fear, and that hurt, but many didn't. Langford was eventually arrested abroad, extradited, brought into a courtroom without his tweed jacket and his little halo of authority. When I testified, I didn't yell. I told the judge and whoever else was listening that I had watched that man charm rooms full of students and parents, that my godson came home smaller every time he met with him, that he died after warning at least 2 people not to trust the story that would be told about him. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm here because you built a system where someone like me, a housekeeper, could see what was happening, and people with degrees chose not to, and that mismatch has a body count. The judge looked tired in that way people get when they've heard too many stories like ours, but something in the room shifted. Parallel to all of that, the Romano estate changed. Catherine's old study turned into the headquarters of the Michael J. Romano Foundation. The chapel filled up again with candles and quiet prayers, not just mine. Victor started walking the halls in the morning, not to inspect, but to greet people by name, to ask how their kids were to listen in a way I had never seen. Out in the garden, we built a low, curved stone wall and carved names into it, not just Michael's, but other students who came forward, some still alive, some not. Above it, we put a line from Michael's journal. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You just need someone to listen. Kids from the community now come to the new center down the hill, the one with big windows and shelves of books and rooms for counseling, and a sign over the door that says, "For quiet voices." I sit with them sometimes and hear echoes of all the things Ethan, Michael, tried to say and couldn't. On good days, when the sun hits the garden just right, and I see Victor sitting on the bench under the oak tree where Michael used to dream out loud, talking gently to some scared parent about how not to miss the child right in front of them, I think, maybe this is what redemption looks like. Not perfect, not clean, but real. On bad days when another story comes in about some other school, some other Langford, I feel the anger rise again. So that's my life, or at least the part of it tied to one boy, one rich man, one university, and a whole lot of silence that finally cracked. I'm still the woman who cleans her own apartment and clips coupons, but I'm also the woman whose name sits beside his on the foundation paperwork, and the woman whose title on some website reads co-founder, even though I still feel more like someone who refused to shut up. You tell me, is that enough for a kid who warned people don't believe the report and left drawings of shadows that we didn't bother to understand until it was too late? Does a father like Victor deserve a second chance after failing that hard? Or is this all just a rich man's version of penance dressed up as philanthropy? If you're still listening, I want to hear what you think. Have you ever been the quiet one? In the room that nobody listened to until something broke? Have you ever watched an institution protect its own instead of the people it was supposed to serve? Drop your story in the comments. Tell me where you stand on forgiveness, responsibility, faith after loss. Because maybe the only way any of this changes is when enough of us stop letting silence be the one doing all the talking.